now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to Shaping Success. I'm your host, Wes Tankersley. Our next guest is a partner and an executive recruiter with Paradigm Staffing. She has a podcast called Fresh Blood, and she talks with people over the age of 40 about their careers and how they're killing it. And I'm over 40. So, Jolie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Wes. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. And like we talked a little bit about in the opening there, you work with people who are a little bit older who are having a hard time finding jobs, correct? Is that kind of what you do?
Actually, for Paradigm Staffing, we're a recruiting firm that specializes in public relations, marketing, and communications. So we place people nationally in large corporations to startups to agencies. And I work with people of all ages from 1 year to, 40 years, if you will, the account executive to CEO.
Okay. And your podcast is about helping people over 40.
Yes, my podcast. Right. Yes, my podcast is Fresh Blood, Killing It After 40. And I'm talking to people who are over the age of 40 who are thriving in life. And we're talking about some of the similar topics, what's their definition of success? And based on that, what do they believe is key to having continued success through life? And we talk about their own successes, their own failures, all of the life lessons that they've had in between, and just pull a lot of those things that you can learn from other people's stories, because there's so much to learn from everybody's story. Yes. So it's there to give inspiration to people who might be feeling a little struggle, might be feeling a little lost, and connecting us. It's, so we can learn from each other, feel less alone. And each episode is designed to inspire you to go out there and live your best life.
So I can see where your job, as well as, I don't know if your podcast is a hobby or if you're doing it, for whatever reasons you're doing it. Like for me, it's for personal reasons, because I really enjoy talking to people like yourself about the things that you're doing. But your job and your podcast kind of go hand in hand pretty much, right?
Yes. It was the motivation. Being a recruiter for over 20 years now, I've had a firsthand seat to the conditions in the corporate world. And again, I'm hired to bring in fresh blood. And fresh blood always means young blood. Yeah. And as I moved up the years, and this always frustrated me, because I would talk with very talented people, they'd have, maybe 22, 23 years of experience, super talented. And they didn't want to move up through the ranks. They didn't want that managerial, if you will, because as you move up through the ranks, you get a little bit less taken away from the actual work, if you will. And so they wanted to find that job where they were doing that work, which might be a manager or a director level. But because they had 20 plus years of experience, the person that they would be reported into generally has less experience and doesn't want to look at them. So time and time again, I just see people constantly being passed over simply because of the years on the resume, no other reason. And it would frustrate me. And then when I hit my 20 years of experience and realized, wow, so many clients would not look at me for so many of these roles just because of the years of my experience. And this blows my mind because I am rocking it. You want me now. Right. Now is when I am at the peak. I know what I'm doing way more than I did even just 10 years ago. So my confidence level is higher. This is where I can make more of an impact. And so I've always found it frustrating. Now, talking to people, what I've noticed is whenever there's kind of a shakeup, a new CEO, an acquisition, a pandemic, the downturns, if you will, that we've gone through, there's always panic when you lose your job. It's a very scary thing. But for the over 40, I noticed there's just a lot more angst, if you will, which is normal because when you're over 40, there's you have the family, you have a lot of other things that maybe you didn't have to deal with when you were younger, aging parents, all of these different things. And then as you move up through the ranks and you have more experience, at least in the corporate world, generally there's less opportunity and more competition. So it is harder to find that right spot. It takes longer for many people, and that causes a lot of fear. So when the pandemic hit, this had been a book that I've been wanting to write. Killing It After 40. What does that take? What does that look like? How do you get through the challenges? When the pandemic hit, I said, okay, it's time to write this book. And when I thought about all of the interviews it was going to take, I said, okay, let's turn this into a podcast and we'll make that content into a book and keynote speeches and things of that nature. So that's what I'm doing.
That's
and
great.
It's been amazing. So I started it, Wes. This is what I've found interesting. I started this to help other people. I wanted to inspire other people and help them. And what I have found is I cannot get over how much this has inspired me and changed me for the better by doing this. So it's an amazing thing.
Yeah, and that is exactly the way that I look at it, and I've often thought about that too. So we'll have to talk about that a little bit later about how you're doing that, because I've always thought about the same thing. I've interviewed, over 40 people, and I want to just write, a couple chapters on each or a chapter on each person or something like that. And
yes,
that's just such a great idea, because it is. This is the reason why we do it, is to help other people see that it's possible. Mm-hmm. But on the same hand, we get to take some of that as well. And I don't know. I mean, it's just inspiring to see people doing things like that.
Isn't it? It is. I mean, and you start carrying their stories around inside of you. And it's what I'm realizing is I'm learning a lot of amazing life lessons without having to do it the hard way.
Right.
by talking with these people and carrying their stories with me.
Yeah. So have you found with the staffing part, I'm sure that there was a lot of people out of work, and you're in California, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And so now that people are getting back to work, and then there's a potential, it's going to shut down again, hopefully it doesn't happen that way. But have you seen with the over 40 group that there are a lot more people being able to be hired? Because I feel like the younger generation would rather stay home and just kind of watch things go on.
That's interesting. It's quite a mixed bag. The common thread here is people want hybrid. That's a big thing. People want hybrid, but a lot of people are wanting to get back into the office. A lot of the younger people in particular are wanting to get back into the office for the social aspect. As far as the over 40, it's pretty standard. The opportunities that are there. It's in my industry right now. It's hopping. There's lots and lots of opportunity, especially for 20 years and younger. The over 20 there's still a great opportunity out there, and there's still a lot of hiring at the VP, SVP level. It's just that the nature of that role is that there are less of them, because companies, you have one SVP, you have one COO, CMO, one CEO, but you might have many managers and many directors. So
yeah, and
full VPs.
It's pretty crazy, because I noticed, like, in Idaho currently, we're having kind of a housing boom, and there's a lot of people moving from Southern California up here, and they started building these homes that have offices in them, because that's all they're doing is all this new construction stuff where people can just work from home. They still are employed in California, but they're working from their house. So
yes,
it's pretty crazy.
It's amazing. Well, the pandemic was a case study. It was a proven case study. We can do it. We can all do our jobs from home for the most part. Obviously not all of them, but the tech jobs and the corporate jobs. I mean, those people have been doing what they needed to do behind their computer at home all year. And so now it's proven it can work. And the employees are now demanding that be at least somewhat of an option to have some flexibility.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how you got into recruiting, a little bit of your education background and things like that. How did you get into being a job recruiter?
So randomly. So I went to school at Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, and I loved public relations, actually. So this was something that I was very interested in getting into. But after I graduated, I didn't want to leave San Luis Obispo. I loved it there. It's just a wonderful place in the world. But there's not a lot of opportunity. So I just started applying to jobs, and I had applied to a lot of different jobs. And one of them was a research role that happened to be with a recruiting firm. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know that recruiting was a career. I didn't know that this really existed out there, just graduate from college. So it really fell into it. And when they were talking to me about what this role entailed and what type of personality excels in this type of position, I was like, oh, this is me. This is all me. I'm all about this. So I pretty much told him, I'm like, look, I'm the person you're looking for. Yes, I don't know what a printed circuit board is or what contract electronics manufacturing is, but I will come back tomorrow and I will tell you everything about it. I promise you, I am this person. So that's what I did. I came back and they hired me, and I ended up really excelling in it. It was something that just really fit for my personality. And it's not an easy profession. It definitely needs a certain type of personality. But it really kind of played to a lot of the things that I love. So I really enjoyed it. And then once I started my own company, I decided to do recruiting in public relations and marketing communications, which was the field that had held my interest in college. And it was like two things came together in a perfect union. And I love what I'm doing.
So did you end up staying in San Luis Obispo, or are you elsewhere now?
No. So this is how I came to start my own business. I was in that recruiting firm and doing really well. Loved it. Getting along nicely in that role. Consistently second or third in the office as terms of bringing in revenue. We had our big biller who was always number one. And me and my current business partner, Lindsay Olson, was also in that office. We were trained together, and we were at first we were nemesis, if you will, trying to get all the work from the other one. and then we became friends and started helping each other and making it work. And so we were consistently number 2 and 3 in the office. And we started to talk about starting our own company eventually. It wasn't something that we wanted to do right then, but it was something that we knew in the future that we wanted to do. And one day we were hanging out with our new office manager that had started just a few months in. And my friend started talking to us about, our company that we're going to start. And I looked at the office manager like, oh God, please do not say anything. Please do not say anything. That's something in the future, it's
right.
Not something we're going to do right now. And fast forward, so a few months, January, my boss gives us all a goal sheet. He says, look, I want everyone to sit down and make your personal goals. Whatever you feel that you want to do this year, you do that. And so I'm always a big believer in aim high, aim really high and really try to get there, because even if you fall short, you still did an amazing, amazing job. So I quadrupled my numbers. I was like, I'm going to make all kinds of, it's going to be insane. So I made all my numbers really big. And this was only supposed to be for yourself. It was supposed to be your personal goals to help you with, life visioning and things of that nature. But I found this out later. I didn't know this at the time. A month later, so it's 1 month later, February 1st, he calls me in and he fires me. And this was out of nowhere. I've always exceeded my company goals. I was never falling below those. But how he fired me was because he used my personal goals. He said, well, you said you were going to do this, and this is what you've done. And you said you were going to do this, and this is what you've done. I was like, but you told me just to aim high, and that's what I did. These are, super big goals, and I'm killing these company goals. I don't understand. He's like, well, this is what you said you did. And it was so weird and very devastating. And I went home, and I can still remember that panic feeling and that what happened, I just don't understand what happened. And I found out months later that the office manager was sleeping with my boss, and she ended up divorcing her husband to go be with him. And so that's what happened, because Lindsay was a very, very close with the owner. So that's what happened and why the firing happened. But while that was very devastating, in the moment, it felt like one of the worst things that had happened. It was a blessing. It was such a gift, because that was the catalyst for me to start my own company. I started looking around. There wasn't much in San Luis Obispo. I loved my job. I was really good at it. I made great money. There was no job out there in San Luis Obispo that was going to pay me that money. So I decided to start my own company, and I went out and did it. And my boss followed up with a nice little note telling me that I would absolutely fail. And by the way, if I were to try to work in the industry where I had all my connections, he would sue me. So I started in a completely new industry. I made it a success. And because I was successful and he kept telling everybody in the office I would fail, one by one, they all ended up leaving the office and starting their own companies too. So it was an interesting experience all around. But I have to say, I'm very grateful for it. It put me on this path, and I have now been running my own recruiting business. Lindsay and I, a few years later, Lindsay and I ended up partnering into Paradigm Staffing. So now we've been running a recruiting company together for over 17 years, and loving it and doing really great. So it's been a wonderful blessing all around.
That's very inspiring to hear that, because it sounds like, like you had two choices, right? You could, just give up and walk away, or you could continue to try and go down that path that you were supposed to go down. And like you said, it was a blessing. It was, even though at the time it probably felt very devastating, like you were saying, that's just a great way to just, pull up your bootstraps and get right back after it.
Yeah. And, from my podcast, I've learned that this is a big thing that happens. A lot of times our greatest moments of despair, they turn into our greatest moments of success. They're the catalyst that puts us on that path. And that's what I've learned from listening to all of these stories. It makes me think there was one woman, Veronica Villanueva, who I spoke with, and she said that she talked a lot about words having power, and she said, I believe that nothing horrible could be put in front of me. I believe anything that is in front of me is actually a gift, and it is my job to figure out what it is. And that's stuck with me. I think that's very powerful.
Man, now you got me thinking. That's a great way to think about it, because really, in reality, everything that it just depends on how you look at it. But everything that you do, you can either look at it as a positive way or a negative way. And you're basically taking something that's negative and turning it into something that's positive, which is what a lot of people struggle with, trying to find that good in the bad.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you about mentorship. Have you had a lot of mentors along the way that have helped you, that have kind of molded you into who you are? How do you feel about mentors?
So that's interesting. I had a mentor in that first recruiting business, who ended up crushing me a little bit. And I would say that after that, I absolutely stayed away from mentors for a very long time. Actively, it's like a mentor kind of a thing. Right. And that was because of pain. That was because of an emotional pain that was causing me to stop from allowing myself to have that. But I ended up joining Toastmasters later on in life, and they sign you mentors. And I actually had a mix up in my Toastmasters where the mentor didn't get assigned, and I was like, no problem, good, that's okay. But the woman who inspired me to sign up, because I went to a meeting and she gave a speech, and I was just blown away by the speech that she gave, which was on a topic that I could care less about. And I was like, oh gosh, this is going to be boring. But she just gave me so much inspiration. She's like, I want to be able to do that. To use your words to make people feel all of these amazing, wonderful feelings inside, and to want to go out and do great things. And so I was like, I really want to learn how to do that. And she ended up becoming my mentor throughout this Toastmasters. And I was in a competition and trying to move up through the ranks. And she really just helped me throughout. And I learned the beauty of having a mentor again. And it is an incredibly powerful thing, and it's an important thing. And I'm so grateful to have opened that back up. In fact, that experiencing of opening that back up made me look at my life in other ways of like, wait a minute, are there other ways I've been holding myself back because of emotional pain that I haven't really been aware of? And yes, the answer was yes. And it actually helped me open up in other areas and bring new wonderful things into my life that I wasn't aware I was holding up myself back from.
Yeah, one of the big things that I've been hearing a lot about lately, and I just read that book as well, but talking about the law of attraction, and you kind of attract what you give out the energy, right? And whatever energy you give out, you're going to get back. Has that played a lot in your progress in things like that? Because it sounds like at first you were kind of around some people who weren't that great. And then now you're starting to realize that that positive energy you put out is giving you more and more access to the people who think like you and do things like you do.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. In fact, I had a really hard time a handful of years back, and I was really struggling. It was, it was another death. My father had passed away, and my mother had passed away many years before. And so anytime you have someone really close in your family die, it's like a bomb exploding, right? And but it's all in slow motion. The things falling, they take months sometimes. You just don't know where things are going to land or what's going to happen. And long story short, it came to a point where I was complaining about everything. I was struggling, there was problems with my brothers, my family members, financial. I was struggling with things with my work. It was all around. I felt like all around me were things that I didn't want. It was everything that I didn't want. And I remember this moment at dinner. It was like I floated above myself and I could hear myself complaining. And it was this, is this who you are? Like, when did you become such a victim? Like, when did you become so negative? Like, what happened? And it was a very big eye-opening moment for me to take that stock and realize that I was putting out. I mean, it was a very hard time and there was struggle. And because of that, my energy was negative, and that's what I was putting out into the world. It was a lot of negativity and a lot of complaining and a lot of, I don't want this and I don't want that. And so it was a moment of taking stock and taking a step back and being like, okay, how do we change this? And what is it that you do want? What do you really want? Let's figure that out. And then let's figure out how to get there. Let's start taking those baby steps each day. And so I did that, and I figured out what I want across the board, not just with career, but with family, with personal, with joy, with education, with love, with it all. And I wrote it all down, and I started taking those steps each day, and I started filling my life with beauty and joy and things that I wanted, and focusing on the things that I could control and letting go of all the things I couldn't control. And I 100% turned around that situation, everything, the family, the friends, the business, myself. I am never been happier than I am in this moment because of that really deep, dark time and having it trigger me to get myself out and get on the path of learning all of those key tools to help you thrive in life.
Well, yeah. And it's one of those rabbit holes that's really easy to go down. Like when you start thinking that way. And that's the funny thing is I've in the last couple of years, I've been trying to go down that path of positivity because I've always been kind of a negative person, and not like negative, but like, all right, it's not going to happen. And then if it happens, I'm happy, instead of reversing that and going, hey,
yes,
it can happen. I'm going to make it happen.
Yes.
And that's the thing that most people don't do. They kind of like, well, oh, well, just kind of give up.
Right.
So it's exciting because you can just, I think the biggest problem that I've ever had is like working with other people and, he got something that I didn't get, and trying to not, always be envious of someone else. And it's a tough thing. And then I find myself going, hey, this isn't making me better. I can't control what they can do. Just like you said, I can control what I do. And it just puts you on the right path, and it kind of rights the ship, and things start to go better when you stop thinking that way.
Right. And that's really important to note, like you said, because this happens a lot when somebody gets a promotion at work over you or something, and it will cause that frustration inside. And a lot of times people will feel that frustration towards the company, towards the manager, and it makes them take a step back almost. When really, like, if you want to get forward in your work, you need to take a step forward. Even if you didn't get that promotion, you need to take that step forward and take on the responsibilities at the next level. Start doing it yourself. Start bringing on anything that you can do to up level so that they can see you in that role. They can see you doing it because you already started doing it. You need to actually enable, what's the word I'm looking for? You want to act basically and do the things that you want to be seen as being and you want to be seen as doing in the future. So you just need to take on those things. Like, if you want to be a writer, you start writing. If you want to be a manager in your current company and you weren't given that management role, then start being a mentor to the people below you and just start helping them and being that kind of a person. It's just that type of thing. So it's very important to focus on the things you can control, and you can control what you're doing. You can control how other people see you. You can control your reactions and move them forward in the best positive manner. And on that note of what you said, as far as of being a negative thinker, because I was too very much, a negative thinker. Right. And I thought that was just something that you are, right? That's, I would think positively, but I have this anxiety. I would say it's more of an anxious thinker. So what I learned is that you can deal with that anxious mind. I would let that anxious mind just run. And what I've learned is anytime it starts to happen, because it's that same thought, oh, it's going to fail. Oh, it's not going to work. And as soon as that happens, you stop it. You're like, nope, change that thought. It's going to work. And then visualize it. And then you have to like picture it, and you just picture everything working, and you picture everything being great and everything working out wonderful. And it's just that it's a practice. Yeah. And you just have to keep doing that over and over and over again. And eventually it starts to get easier, and then the anxiety becomes less. And it's kind of like a miracle. So I would suggest if anyone's out there has that negative mindset, just bring awareness to it and practice every time that negative thought pops in, practice replacing it with the complete opposite, the most positive that you can think of, and then visualize it. And if you keep doing that, you can literally retrain your brain and your nervous system's response to different thought processes and situations.
Yeah. And I think, again, that is great insight. I think the biggest thing to remember is that it's not always going to be easy. And I think that a lot of people figure that out. It's never easy. You still,
never
even though
easy.
People see that positive outlook every single time with you, there is those times where you are negative. So they just see this and then they don't understand that it's not an easy thing. You have to choose to try and be better about it.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right. Because the negative thought process, the negative mindset is actually, that's what's normal. Everybody has it. It's a gift from our caveman ancestors to us, because it behooved us to think everything was danger. You wanted to think everything was negative. It saved your life. Like if you saw a stick, you wanted to be like, oh, that's a snake, because that's going to save your life. So that's been passed down to us throughout all these years. But now we live in a very different world where that negative mindset is not saving our life. It's actually causing harm to our life. And so people need to understand that that's very normal. The negative thoughts, they're not right. They're just normal. Yeah. So you have to be aware that these negative thoughts that you're having, again, they're not right. So you have to practice replacing them with the thoughts that you really, you want to have, the ones that make you happy and make you feel good. And you can do that. Anyone can do it. It just takes practice. And again, not easy and consistent, but it works when you keep at it.
Yep. Well, hey, I wanted to say thank you for taking the time to be on here. We have one last question that we typically ask every single guest. The show is called Shaping Success, and I like your message because it's very similar to mine, and you can change your path. You can be successful in whatever way you want to be. How do you shape your success? How would you define success for yourself?
Success for myself is living the life that I want to be living and being very clear on what my personal goals are, what my desires are, and then embodying that life. That's my definition of success. And because it's different for everybody. So I think everybody needs to figure out their own definition of success, just like what you're doing with your podcast, which I love. Everyone needs to figure out their own definition of success and then figure out how to live that life and to live it with a open heart, with positivity, connection, and love. And that's what I've been trying to do. And I'm very grateful for all the experiences that have brought me to this point so that I can be living this life.
Yep. Well, thanks for taking the time. I have had your Instagram rolling across the bottom there for the episode. Can you tell people that the podcast is called the Fresh Blood Podcast? Where can they find you? Where can they find that?
So you can find Fresh Blood Podcast, Killing It After 40 on any streaming service. You can follow us on Facebook at Fresh Blood Podcast, on Instagram at Fresh Blood Podcast, on Twitter at Fresh Blood Pod, and then you can find me on LinkedIn, Jolie Downs, on Facebook. Please connect with me. I love connecting with people, and if there's anything I can do to help, I would be happy to do so.
Well, thanks again for the conversation, Jolie. It's been an awesome time. I love sharing what you're doing, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Wes. I love what you're doing and appreciate the message you're getting out there. Thanks for having me on.
Yep. Thank you very much. Hey, everyone. That is the end of the show. Until next time, I challenge you to find the shape of your success.